The first story takes place at an old subway station deep in the heart of a busy city. It's one of those places that most commuters pass by without a second thought, but for those who linger, something far darker lurks beneath the surface. This station, built in the early 1900s, is known for its eerie history. There have been numerous reports over the years about strange noises, flickering lights, and even sightings of ghostly figures. But one particular story has terrified anyone who dares to speak of it. It all started one cold winter night when a young woman named Claire was running late for her last train. The city had just been hit with a heavy snowstorm, and the streets were practically deserted. She rushed into the subway station, her breath visible in the cold air as she descended the stairs. The station was unusually quiet. The flickering overhead lights created an almost surreal atmosphere. The hum of the trains and the sounds of busy commuters were replaced by an unsettling silence. Claire glanced around, her footsteps echoing through the empty platform. Her train was due in just a few minutes, and she figured she could wait it out without much trouble. But then something caught her eye. Across the platform, near the tunnel entrance, she saw a man standing perfectly still. He was wearing a dark, tattered coat, and his face was hidden in the shadows. His stance was unnerving, almost as if he were waiting for her. Claire's heart skipped a beat, but she tried to shake off the feeling of dread that crept over her. She wasn't alone after all. There had to be others in the station too. But as she looked around again, Claire realized something terrifying. She was the only one there. The platform was empty, save for the man. Her train hadn't arrived yet, so Claire made the decision to keep her distance and wait closer to the turnstiles. She kept her eyes on the man, but he didn't move. His presence was so still it was like he wasn't even real. Her anxiety grew with every passing second. Something wasn't right. Just as she turned to check the schedule on the wall, Claire heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, expecting to see another commuter, but there was no one there. The man was gone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The train had still not arrived, and the station was as empty as it had been before. She glanced nervously down the tunnel and noticed that the lights at the far end flickered intermittently. The silence seemed almost oppressive, as though the entire station was holding its breath. Claire turned her attention back to the platform. She saw a train coming into the station, but it wasn't the usual train that she had been expecting. This one was darker, with grime smeared along the windows. The doors opened with a slow creak, but instead of the usual crowds of commuters, the train was completely empty. The strange man, who had disappeared moments ago, now stood at the far end of the train, his dark figure visible through the windows. Claire's instincts screamed at her to run, but she was paralyzed with fear. The train doors remained open, inviting her to step inside. She couldn't move. Something was pulling her toward it, and she didn't understand why. It felt as if the train itself was calling to her. With a sense of dread that chilled her to the core, Claire slowly took a step forward. The sound of her footsteps was the only thing breaking the oppressive silence. She was now only a few feet away from the train doors when, suddenly, they slammed shut with a force that shook the platform. Claire jumped back, her heart racing. She turned to run but was stopped by a sound. A voice, barely audible, coming from the direction of the train. It was a whisper, soft and menacing. "You should have gotten on," it said. Claire spun around in terror, but there was no one there. The platform was as empty as before, the train now gone from the station. She stood frozen for a moment, struggling to understand what had just happened. Had it all been a hallucination? Was she just exhausted from the stress of her day? But deep down, she knew that something was wrong. The eerie silence in the station was broken only by the distant sound of trains arriving at other platforms. Without hesitation, Claire sprinted up the stairs and out of the station. She didn't stop running until she was safely in the bustling streets above. It was only then that she realized she had lost track of time. The entire ordeal had lasted no more than a few minutes, yet she felt as though hours had passed. When Claire returned to the subway station the next day, everything seemed normal again. The usual crowds filled the platform and the trains were running on schedule. But as she passed the spot where she had seen the man, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, watching her. Later that day, Claire spoke with a few of the station workers. She had hoped to get an explanation, but when she mentioned the incident, they all went strangely quiet. One of them, an older man with a tired face, finally spoke up. "You're not the first to see him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That man's been haunting this station for years. No one knows who he is or why he's here, but if you see him, you're as good as gone." From that day on, Claire never set foot in that subway station again. And to this day, no one can explain the strange happenings that have plagued it for so long. The haunting continues, and the dark figure waits for the next person to notice him. Some say if you look too long, you'll be pulled into the train, never to be seen again. Our second story takes us to one of the most terrifying places in the world, the Dianshita Subway Station in Xi'an, China. This station, which was opened in 2011, is part of the city's growing underground transit system. But despite its modern appearance, something unsettling lingers beneath the surface. The station's history has been marred by mysterious events that have left many commuters too afraid to take the train after dark. It all began in the early years after the station first opened. At first, passengers didn't think much of the reports of strange sounds and flickering lights, but that all changed when the disappearances began. The first case was that of a man named Li Wei. He was a regular commuter, known by many of the station's workers. One evening, after a long day at work, Li Wei boarded the last train to head home. It was late, past midnight, and the station was eerily quiet. The train was almost empty, with just a few passengers scattered along the seats. As the train began to pull out of the station, something strange happened. The train's lights flickered, and the temperature inside dropped dramatically, as if a cold breeze had swept through the entire car. Passengers began to murmur nervously, but Li Wei, exhausted from his day, barely noticed. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the far end of the car, followed by the sound of something, or someone, scraping along the floor. Li Wei turned to see nothing but darkness, and yet the sound persisted, growing louder as though something was moving closer. Panic started to spread among the few passengers, but before anyone could react, the train suddenly came to a screeching halt. The lights went out completely, and the train was plunged into total darkness. Moments later, the emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie red glow throughout the car. Li Wei, now wide awake and filled with dread, noticed that the other passengers were gone. The train was completely empty. In a state of panic, Li Wei rushed to the door, only to find that it was locked. He could hear strange noises like whispers coming from the darkness. He pounded on the door, screaming for help, but no one came. The train remained stationary in the dark tunnel for what felt like hours. But when the doors finally opened, Li Wei was gone. The train resumed its journey as if nothing had happened. When the authorities investigated, they found no sign of Li Wei or the other passengers. All they could find was his personal belongings, abandoned on the seat where he had been sitting. Word quickly spread about the mysterious disappearance, and soon, other commuters started to report similar experiences. They claimed to have seen ghostly figures standing in the shadows of the platform late at night, or heard faint whispers and footsteps echoing through the tunnels. But the most chilling part of the story is that many of these strange events seem to be linked to the exact same location on the platform, where Li Wei had been last seen. One commuter, a woman named Mei Ling, said she encountered something truly terrifying while waiting for her train late one evening. She had just stepped onto the platform at Dianshita when she noticed a man standing near the tracks, staring intently at her. He was dressed in an old-fashioned, tattered coat, and his face was hidden in the shadows. Mei Ling thought nothing of it at first, thinking he might be a fellow commuter waiting for the same train. But as she got closer, she realized something was terribly wrong. The man didn't move. His eyes were locked on her, and yet he didn't appear to blink. His presence was so unnerving that Mei Ling couldn't bring herself to step closer. She froze, staring at him from a distance. And then, before she could react, he vanished. There was no one there. Mei Ling's heart raced as she hurried to board the next train, trying to shake off the terrifying encounter. But after that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her every time she rode the subway. One evening, another strange event occurred. A train pulled into Dianshita Station with an unusual delay. The passengers on board were getting restless as they waited for the train to move. But when the doors finally opened, something terrifying happened. The first thing the passengers noticed was that the air inside the train felt unnaturally cold. Then, as they stepped out onto the platform, they were struck by an overwhelming sense of dread. The lights above them flickered erratically, casting long, twisting shadows along the walls. One by one, commuters began to feel as if they were being followed. A few claimed to hear footsteps behind them, but when they turned around, no one was there. Another commuter, a man named Zhao Han, reported feeling a cold hand brush against his shoulder as he waited for the next train. When he turned around, there was no one nearby. That's when the rumors about the ghost of Dianshita Station began to spread. Many locals began to believe that the station was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had mysteriously disappeared. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures standing along the tracks, watching them from a distance. Others spoke of hearing whispers in the wind, carried through the tunnels late at night. As the years passed, the stories grew more chilling. Some said that if you looked too long at the shadows on the platform, they would start to move, slowly creeping toward you. Others believed that the ghost of Li Wei still haunted the station, waiting for his next victim. To this day, commuters who pass through Dianshita Subway Station still report strange, unexplainable occurrences. Most of them try to avoid the station late at night, unwilling to risk encountering whatever entity lurks in the darkness. And for those who do dare to travel through the station at night, the question remains: will they be the next to vanish, or will they be lucky enough to escape the haunting grip of Dianshita? Our third story takes us to one of the busiest subway systems in the world, the New York City subway, specifically to the 42 and D Street, Times Square station. This station, a major transit hub, connects travelers to some of the city's most iconic locations. But despite the constant hustle and bustle, there's an unsettling dark side to this famous landmark that few know about. It all started one late evening in 1983, when a young man named Jason Parker, a college student who had just moved to New York City, boarded a subway train after a late night studying at the library. Jason was still getting used to the chaos of the city. He had heard the usual warnings from locals about the subway, stories of creepy encounters, strange happenings, and odd people, but he dismissed them as nothing more than urban legends. That night, after finishing his studies, Jason headed for the 42nd Street station, hoping to catch the last train back to his apartment in Brooklyn. The station was nearly empty, save for a few other tired commuters. Jason was relieved as he didn't have to deal with the usual crowd. As he descended the stairs to the platform, he noticed a strange man sitting on one of the benches near the tracks. The man was dressed in an old, worn-out suit, his face hidden in the shadows of his wide-brimmed hat. He didn't seem to move or acknowledge Jason's presence. Jason thought nothing of it at first. New Yorkers are used to seeing all sorts of people, but there was something about this man that unsettled him. He was too still, almost as if he wasn't even alive. Jason pulled his jacket tighter around him, shaking off the uneasy feeling. The train was scheduled to arrive soon. However, as he waited, the station's lights flickered. The hum of the subway system grew louder, but there was an eerie silence in the air. The atmosphere was thick, almost suffocating. As Jason stood there waiting for the train to arrive, he felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to turn around. He did so, and to his shock, the man was standing just behind him, inches away. Jason froze, his heart racing. The man had somehow moved without making a sound. His wide-brimmed hat now cast a shadow over his face, but Jason could still see his lips curling into a twisted, unsettling grin. "The train doesn't come for you," the man whispered, his voice hoarse and cold. Jason, trying to suppress his growing fear, took a step back. He didn't know why, but the man's words sent a shiver down his spine. The man took a step forward, now inches from Jason's face. "You're not meant to leave," he said again, his smile widening. Terrified, Jason spun around and ran toward the far end of the platform, desperately searching for the next train. But as he looked back, the man was gone, vanished into thin air. The platform was empty. Jason was in a complete panic now. The train wasn't coming, and there was no sign of the man. He didn't know what was happening, but his instincts screamed at him to get out of there. Just as he turned to leave the platform, the lights flickered again, and the sound of an approaching train filled the air. Jason didn't think twice. He ran up the stairs and out of the station, relieved to finally feel the cool night air. It wasn't until the next day that Jason would learn the chilling truth about what had happened to him. When he returned to his usual subway station, he overheard a conversation between two subway workers who seemed troubled. They were talking about a strange occurrence at the 42 and D Street, Times Square station, where a man had gone missing a week prior. His name was Richard Hall, and he had been a regular commuter who worked as a stockbroker in the city. He was last seen at the same platform where Jason had encountered the mysterious figure. The workers told Jason that Richard Hall had boarded a train one evening, only to disappear without a trace. There were no witnesses, no security footage, and no explanation for what had happened. The only strange thing was that Richard Hall's last known location was the same area where Jason had seen the mysterious man. Jason felt a cold chill run down his spine. Was the man he had encountered a ghost of the missing stockbroker? Or was something even darker at play? He didn't know, but the incident haunted him for weeks. But the story didn't end there. As the years went by, more commuters began to report similar encounters in the 42nd Street station. They spoke of seeing a man in a worn-out suit, with a wide-brimmed hat, who would silently watch them from a distance. Some said they heard him whispering strange, cryptic messages, much like what Jason had experienced. Others reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they passed by that section of the platform. Despite the eerie stories, the New York City subway system has continued to operate without interruption, as commuters go about their daily routines, often unaware of the lingering presence beneath the surface. But for those who have encountered the strange figure at 42 and D Street, Times Square station, the experience remains one they will never forget. To this day, no one knows exactly who the man in the worn-out suit is, or why he appears in the station at night. But if you ever find yourself alone at 42nd Street late at night, and you feel the sudden chill of someone watching you, remember Jason Parker's story. Because some spirits never leave. They wait, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next person to cross their path.